you all so much for being here. I'm Grace Francisca. I'm the events coordinator for AMG, and I'm so pleased to have Jennifer, Lisa, and Jessica here to be part of our career panel for Student Affairs Officer. And to let you guys all know, the chat is open. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it. And let's go ahead and get started. Jennifer, I'll start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your current position, and what led you to your current job?
Yeah, sure. So hi all, my name is Jennifer Banawa. I am currently the graduate advisor for the Department of Anthropology. Previously, I was SAO was my title there in the Department of Community Health Sciences in the School of Public Health. What led me to the SAO job specifically wasn't very a traditional pathway. I wasn't actually seeking out SAO work when I was first thinking about working full-time after graduating from college. Much of my pre-SAO experience was actually with HR recruiting. I was a recruiter at a temporary staffing agency, and I did a lot of my internships and a couple months working full-time in that kind of space. And then I ended up applying to UCLA as a contracts and grants pre-award specialist. So I was mainly working on the finance side of things and also helping faculty and graduate students submit extramural fellowships or grants. I just really ended up in the SAO role in community health sciences when the SAO had left for another position, and my supervisor essentially just encouraged me to apply. And I was actually worried at first about, did I have any transferable skills to an SAO job? Because I knew nothing about it. It wasn't really on my radar. But when I talked to my predecessor, I did realize that, yes, I did have a lot of transferable skills, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit. And I did the role, and after a year, I just fell in love with it. And I've been a graduate student advisor ever since 2013.
Amazing. So it's been almost 10 years for you, right, Jennifer?
Almost 10 years.
Wow. Okay. Jessica, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and, your current role and what led you to the position?
Sure. Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Amaya. I am the college advising trainer in the Center for Academic Advising in the college. So with my role, I am working with undergraduate students, but I also support advisors and counselors in the college and with a lot of other campus partners with training on policies and how to best support our students. Prior to this role, I was an undergraduate SAO in the Department of Economics. And prior to that, I was an undergraduate counselor in one of the colleges at UC San Diego. So my entire professional career has been as an undergraduate counselor, which I did not know was going to happen when I graduated from college. I was one of, those students that had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. My goal was to not move back home. And I was very fortunate to get an assistant advisor position upon graduation. So when I was a student, I was very involved in student activities, and I worked in an advising office as a student worker. That really started everything for me, but I didn't know this was the field I wanted until I was an assistant counselor. I realized I love working with college students. I love supporting them. And through my journey of working, kind of climbing up into different positions, eventually getting my master's degree, I also realized I really love working with staff, and I love being a support for staff members and creating community on this campus. I'm so big about creating community where I can. And I am very grateful that I've been in this position for the last 4.5 years, and that I get to feed both passions, one being working with students and one being working with staff members.
Awesome. And Lisa, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to the position?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Lee, and I'm the grad SAO for psychology. We're a really large department. We have a little bit over 200 grad students. So there are actually 3 grad SAOs on our team, including myself. And let's see, I was a UCLA undergrad, and while I was an undergrad, I was a CAC peer advisor. So I sat in one of those little carts outside talking to students about their requirements and stuff. And so I think that really planted a seed After graduation, I actually got stuck in doing AP at UCLA. I was a specialist and then an analyst for the physical sciences. So I did that for like 2 years and I did not really like it. I realized I would rather talk to people in person rather than seeing them on paper. But now that I'm a lot older, I think I like that too. Just talking to people on paper. But anyways, and so I actually tried to transition to student affairs a couple times, wasn't successful. So I went to grad school. And I started teaching second grade, but wasn't getting any jobs. And so it was really easy for me to return to UCLA with my AP experience and start in student affairs here. And I loved it because I didn't have to deal with parents and grading. And so I started in Slavic, which is now, the name has changed, but there I did both grad and undergrad. And it was really an interesting experience because in a smaller department, the SAO really does a lot. I ordered the water. I picked the copy machine. I did so much more than just wearing a student affairs hat. And so I really learned so much. And by my second year, I asked my supervisor, Barbara Van Ostrand, if I can, start hiring and get more experience in that way.
Mhm.
And so that was really a good experience for me to kind of learn and grow. And anyways, and so I then moved on to another division, to social sciences, to geography. And I was there a short period. And during that time, I did PDP. So I was encouraged to look, grow, why not apply to different places. And so I did then apply to psychology for One Step Up, SAO3 Soup. And that's where I am today.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Wow, what a journey you all have had. And speaking about your experiences, it seems like everyone comes from different experiences. Jennifer, you mentioned you've done pre-award. Lisa, you mentioned that you've done, AP, and Jessica, you've done like a lot of SAO and now transitioning to supporting staff as well. So I'm going to start with you, Lisa. What do you think are the skills, both hard and soft skills, training, you mentioned that you had to go back to getting a master's, like what degree and talents do you need to be an SAO, and what prior experiences are necessary? Did being an AP person helped you in this position and things like that?
As a supervisor right now, I'm constantly hiring SAOs. And so some of the things that I feel like are very important are good communication skills, verbally and written, listening skills, right? We're always listening to students, faculty, whatnot. I really appreciate individuals who are respectful and empathetic. Yeah, I had an interviewer once say something that, during the pandemic, they had to help faculty and it was like, used a word like annoying or something like that. And I'm like, that's really not a characteristic of an SAO. Maybe it's not the right job for you. And someone who's observant and thoughtful. Yeah, and those are skills that you learn and you develop over time too. So I really think, anyone really with a heart to help others can really get into student affairs and thrive, because that's all it really takes. And then you just learn and grow while you're in it. I do think AP helped me in my past. Everything, everything happens for a reason, and it does help me. Specifically AP, like you have to be very organized. I literally got the dossier and CV and had to match the number to the publication box and stuff like that. And so, you do need to be organized as an SAO. And I think there's a lot of transferable skills. Did I answer your question? Great.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And then I'll go to you, Jennifer. And can you tell us a little bit about what skills you think are necessary? Is it, necessary to get a master's? And what does your experience relate to your current job?
Yeah, so a lot of my thoughts basically build up on Lisa's, but I also do want to include like event planning. If you have any event planning experience, that is very helpful, because as a department SAO, you're essentially planning your students' orientation, admitted students day for grad students, as well as any graduation celebration events. So having that background will really help. And I guess that ties into just being organized. And Lisa also mentioned this too. Just knowing how, like being familiar with how you work, and being familiar with what will help you keep organized. I know that looks different for everybody. For me, I really like digital organization. I know for other people, they really like things on pen and paper. So whatever works for you just keeps you organized, just stick with that. The other thing that I noted was, I think I mentioned, is budgeting. From when I was working as the contracts and grant specialist, I was also in charge of essentially creating the budget for these proposals. And so that basically gave me a template of what I needed to keep track of my own budget. So but from the graduate department SAO perspective, I keep a budget on their student fellowships. If I have an event budget, I had to keep a budget for that. And just also encumbrances too, because with graduate students packages, you may have to deal with multi-year packages. So being organized and keeping a good budget is also very important. You mentioned degree. So I want to say that you don't really need one. I don't know how other people feel about that, but with personal experience, you don't really need a master's. I'm actually pursuing an MA in higher ed right now. And that was just a personal choice because I felt like I wanted a more structured learning experience as to how higher ed actually works. And that's just the way that I work. I know I tried many times to just do it on my own, but then I just end up losing motivation a couple of weeks later. So I just felt like doing an actual degree program may be the best way for me to learn. There's also a lot of chatter on a lot of internet forums that maybe you don't really need a master's to do student affairs work, and that it is expensive. And I would recommend that anybody here who is thinking about doing an MA just to solely get into the field of student affairs to just really think about the cost and to really only pursue one if you can get an assistantship that would pay your tuition and fees. I don't know how real I could be here in a minute, but like the cost of the master's, depending on what you're looking at, may not be, or it may exceed what you can potentially make as an SAO. And I just wanted to put that out there in terms of, probably don't really need one. And when I started, I just only had my bachelor's.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Jessica, I'll turn it over to you and ask you the same question. What skills, training, and talents do you think are necessary?
A lot of it is going to be echoing what Lisa and Jennifer already said. I do want to start with the master's degree piece though. So I think it is important to acknowledge that a lot of SAO positions will say master's preferred. So I definitely have opinions about the master's degree and like my own experience of getting the master's while working full-time, which is an experience. And anyone who is considering that, please to talk to someone who's done it, so we can maybe share what that is like, because it is an experience. So I have heard, the pushback on whether or not it's required in the practice, but sometimes, when it says preferred, that may be something that they really look at for screening. But also master's degrees can really help depending on the type of program. So my master's is not in counseling, it's in higher education leadership. But when I was in the program, I did counseling focused projects. So I made the degree work for me, and I learned about different philosophies, different theories that I do see in practice with students. So I think it can be beneficial if that's information you're interested in. But as far as like the day-to-day, definitely the listening skills, the compassion, being able to keep clear, concise records. So we have something called Counselor Desktop that we write notes after we meet with students, and that is extremely helpful down the line. Also, clear communication with colleagues across campus and with students is really helpful. So you do want to come into this knowing like, yes, there are policies you have to know and explaining the rationale and enforcing them, but we are working with humans and understanding that you may not know what they're going through, and they are deserving of compassion and understanding, even when we are helping them navigate a university. So I know when I've met with folks who are interested in SAO work, that's something that I try to bring up. You're working with a human. You need to be willing and wanting to work with human beings and understanding what that means, because we're not just robots. We are working with people. And if we want compassion and understanding, they need compassion and understanding too.
Wow, well said, Jessica. That kind of leads me to my next question. What is your typical day like? And I know that day to day it's always very different, but what is it usually like as an SAO if someone, were to come in and, open your office and shadow you? Jessica, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so with my position, it's going to be genuinely different day to day or even half of the day. So as an example, this morning I was prepping and planning for what training is going to look like next quarter. And I just came from a training session with some new college counselors. But this afternoon, I'm going to be on drop-in. So I will be meeting with undergrads for the next few hours, talking to them about whatever they are bringing to the table this week. So depending on the time in the quarter, I might be fully student facing, whether that be in appointments or drop-in. I might be doing email communications with different colleagues across campus, planning and actually hosting training. That's going to be a big one coming up in the next few months. So it's a lot of projects and a lot of really intentional planning.
Wow. And Lisa, how about you?
Let's see. So I transitioned from doing both undergrad and grad to just grad. And I've noticed that as a grad advisor, we have much more communication with faculty on a daily basis. So it's very common for me to have a lot of emails from faculty asking all sorts of questions. And so having advising time set aside, I no longer do that for grad advising, which I used to do when I was an undergrad advisor. And so a lot of emails, and a lot of the emails, whether it's from grad students or faculty, it's regarding problem solving. Not so much about requirements, because when you're in grad school, you pretty much your requirements for the most part, and you don't need that much handholding in terms of requirements. And so a lot of problem solving, whether it's resources or whatnot. And I would say like a big portion of my job is grad funding. And when I was an grad advisor, that's one aspect that I really enjoyed and found challenging, and that's why I pursued the grad advising role. I find it fascinating, and budgeting and all that stuff, multi-year packages like Jen mentioned. I like doing that stuff. And so I do a lot of that. And psychology is so big, we do hold our own workshops during the quarter. Like in the fall, we have acing the interview. We have like all these different kinds of workshops within house, and it's very similar to Career Center, but it's basically with like our faculty as panelists and etc. Let's see. I think that's about it. I mean, my department psychology is so big that we have committees and staff or support for those committees. So yeah, I'm like scheduling those meetings or hosting them. And also like I am a supervisor, so I'm supervising my supervisees and like making sure that their work is done too, or helping my supervisees.
Thank you, Lisa. And Jen, I'll turn it over to you. Let us know what your typical day is like.
So just like Jessica or Lisa, there really isn't a typical day, but
Yeah.
What's consistent for me, at least, is answering emails every day. That's at least consistent, but the day-to-day operations changes every single day depending on what's due. So in my role, I wear a lot of hats. So it's not just grad advising, but it's also taking care of the finances related to graduate students, and also hiring. So I do all of the UC Path stuff for the TAs and readers and even postdocs in my department. So my role might look different to another grad SAO's role, in that maybe another grad SAO does like course scheduling, where I don't do any of that, but in exchange, I basically do a lot of the hiring. And so my role is almost like 75% SAO work and then 25% hiring, but that also could flip-flop depending on the day and depending on what's due and who I need to hire. As Lisa mentioned, we do talk a lot with faculty, well, in terms of grad students advising. Also, a part of the role sometimes that I have to do, not on a day-to-day basis, but I would want to say like every other week at least, is advocating for our students to faculty. So as staff, we are pretty much almost the experts on the policies, well, within our unit or within our department at least, and faculty and students might not be as aware as we are. So there are times where a student may come to us and say that the faculty member told us to do this. Is that allowed? And so maybe we have to say like, actually it has to be X instead. There are times where there might be a conflict with the faculty and student relationship that we may have to step in, and also may have to bring in department leadership to help kind of mediate that. So it does look different every day. And there are definitely different levels of work throughout different types of seasons. So like for instance, right now it's admissions that's really heavy. In the next couple of months, it's going to be Admitted Students Day. And then, of course, towards June, it's going to be just making sure everybody who wants to file their PhD actually knows what to do to file their PhD.
Thank you. And, something that you all have raised is that you have to wear different hats, right? Like whether it's hiring, budgeting, or working with staff and students. My question is, how do you transition? Is it an easy transition? Like, especially like, Jessica, you mentioned earlier you were doing staff and training, and then this afternoon you have to transition to like forward-facing student. How is that transition like? And, is it difficult? Is it challenging? And Jessica, I'll start with you since I mentioned you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just used to it by now, but for me, it's easy, and I don't want to pretend that it's easy at jump, like if you're just going into it. I have the benefit of having a calendar, so I can look ahead and know like, okay, this is what my day is going to look like, and I can mentally prepare as much as possible. But there are sometimes moments where I'm maybe doing the training side of my job and someone comes to my office like, hey, I need a consult on a student situation. Like, okay, great, I can take a break and we can talk about this. So I think being able to switch gears, as long as it works within your time frame, as long as it works within your boundaries. So I'm also a big advocate for time boundaries of, I will help you with this, give me 5 minutes. I think that's really important. So yeah, I'm just going to go back to it. It's easy for me, but I've also been doing this for almost 14 years. Yeah. So I'm just in the habit of, okay, if something comes up, I will shift gears and then come back when I can. And it's just a part of the job. I don't know if anyone else has something more to add.
I'll go to Jennifer. Jennifer, what do you want to add on to that?
It's a very similar experience. Yeah. I mean, my ideal would be I can, like in the beginning of the day, I can list out like, okay, from like 8 to 10, I'll do funding. And then from 10 to like 12, I'll do hiring. But that never really works out for me. It also depends on like if I'm getting an email and it's an urgent request, or even just like a student emergency. That's something where I'm just going to have to immediately switch gears on. Like, for instance, if somebody, like a student out in the field needs to be evacuated for whatever reason, I need to switch gears right away. I can't just like do like, oh, I'll just finish my financials and then do this. So I am used to it too. As Jessica mentioned, I have been doing it for a while. It can still be jarring at times because you're like, oh, I really need to get this hiring thing done. And then something happens, something inevitably happens where it needs to take away your focus. But then you just end up having to roll with it. And like, to me, I always say in my head, it'll all work out. I'll get it done. Like, let me not panic, because once I start panicking, then things may start falling apart. So I try to stay as calm as possible.
And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you. How do you find the transition to be, especially as a supervisor too?
Yeah, I have a lot of lists. So I have like to do today lists, and then I have a pending list, and I have things, and my calendar is like my best friend. I put in everything. Right now, I mean, for a while we were a little short staffed, so I was doing 3 jobs, and I just kind of think back to like what I've been doing a couple months. Really, I just prioritized. Like my list, today I need to answer all the admissions questions and then, revisit it. So like every week I have a reminder that says answer admissions related questions. And then, um, keeping organized in my own way, I think that has kind of helped me survive, going from task to task or wearing different hats. So yeah.
So a common theme I'm hearing a lot is staying organized, right? Like you guys mentioned to-do lists and time blocks and things like that. But that's difficult, right? So how do you keep yourself organized with other stuff, right? Not just, all these to-do lists, but especially in person, there's phone calls or students coming in. And so how do you guys stay organized and manage those different tasks? I'll start with you, Jennifer.
So as Lisa mentioned, I also use my calendar a lot. So if there's a deadline coming up, I set the reminder to pop up a week before, or if I need to respond to something right away, I also set a reminder. For like longer, like future looking tasks, meaning like a task like maybe later in the quarter or in another quarter, I actually use Trello to help keep me in line with what I need to do next and just to know like what I need to do in the next couple of weeks. The other thing that I do that may be a bit neurotic, but it works for me, is that I actually keep a daily work log. So I use OneNote, and like any task that I do, like other than answering emails, I actually keep a note of it, even when I meet with students. So as a grad advisor, we don't have Counselor Desktop. So if I meet with students, I can't really put in notes in a formal system. So I use OneNote to keep track of who I met with and what we talked about, so that it can refresh my memory if they ask me a question again and I'm like, I met with 50 other students between now and then I don't remember what it was. So I do keep work logs. It may look a little obsessive, but it does help me a lot, because as we're doing so many tasks throughout the day, or even just throughout like 1 week, I don't really remember what I did on Monday. So I could just go and look at my Monday log and see, did I actually do that task that I was supposed to do by Thursday or something? So I keep organized digitally, and I just like to keep it like that.
Amazing. And Jessica, what about you?
Really similar. My calendar is my best friend. I'm even thinking about back in my time in econ when I didn't necessarily have blocks, and so things would come up, but I would still have little notes on my calendar of like, okay, I need to try to have this done, or these are deadlines that are coming up. But now with my current position, I have to have my calendar. I have to have everything there. I also use sticky notes on my computer, whether or not I look at them later on, but I at least have it written down. I'm also really big on pen and paper. So I kind of do digital and pen and paper. And I might write something down in 2 or 3 places just to make sure it's somewhere. So if I do unintentionally forget about something, if I look in a different area, I'm like, oh, wait, no, I need to email this person back. Or, oh, no, I said I'd have this project done by today or tomorrow. Let me try to get this done. Also being flexible and kind with myself. So as many reminders as I have, as intentional as I try to be with my calendar blocks, knowing that it's not going to be perfect. And I think another theme that's coming up is it'll get done. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be fine. And if it's maybe, as long as it's not a huge thing, like a day late, half a day late, it'll be okay. Like the ones that can't be, I know what they are and I will get them done.
Thank you. Yeah, I think being kind to yourself is something that we all have to really do on a daily basis. And, my next question is, what do you guys like best about your job, and what is the most challenging or least appealing about it? I'll start with you, Lisa.
Okay, so I thought about this question for a little bit, and I mentioned it a little bit before, but I do like grad funding and I like problem solving. And I know that's not for everyone. I've had a lot of friends, SAO friends, say like grad funding is kind of scary, which I do admit it's serious stuff. Like if you don't do a good job, then someone might not eat that day, right? So, but I find that challenging and fulfilling. And also I love seeing students accomplish their goals. I love seeing them on orientation day, just so lost and not really sure. And then, seeing them grow and progress. Our program's 6 years, so I get to see them as, first years and then see them at the finish line in year 6. And so to see them like grow up, basically, that's always enjoyable for me and fulfilling. Let's see, and some challenges or things that I don't really enjoy is dealing with like disjointed systems at UCLA. I mean, we're a big institution with lots of cooks in the kitchen. One recent example is one bill. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. Maybe it is for some, but it really sucks that everyone had to kind of be forced to be getting one bill, like their housing and parking all on the same bill. I've had some students complain or like want to opt out, but there's no way.
Yeah.
And also another thing is like, did you guys know that stipends at UCLA follow the financial aid disbursement calendar? So you get stipends 2 weeks before the payment period, but if you are an employee, TA, GSR, reader, you get that a month, like you get that after the period worked. It follows the payroll calendar. So a lot of our students who are hopping from being a student worker, like TA, GSR, and then going on a stipend the next quarter, they kind of can't really figure out budgeting and it's challenging. And so that's just like, that's how my answer is, like, that's just how it is. And I hate saying that because it shouldn't be so hard to get consistent payments at UCLA. But anyway, so that's just my 2 cents.
And I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer. What do you like most about your job and what do you find to be the most challenging?
So I just like helping students, just helping them navigate the university and their program requirements, given their own unique situation and what they're dealing with. One thing I take great joy in is creating or implementing new ways to just make navigation so much easier for students. And that's always like a constant thing. Like I created something recently. I'm like, great, that's set up. But then now I realize, oh, there's something else that I should probably improve here so that students actually have the tools that they can consult themselves and basically empower themselves to navigate the university system, not only just the requirements, but also like the various resources and services that are available. The least appealing part, and I know it's not unique to just SAO positions. I know there's probably a lot of positions that experience this, but it's just that time crunch that you experience at the end of each quarter, because inevitably you'll get a multitude of last minute exception requests or like requests from faculty and students just saying like, oh, I totally forgot I needed to do this before the quarter ended. What do I do now? I need to get this resolved. And so that just adds on to just kind of like the panic and the stress towards the end of the quarter, especially like as we're nearing campus closure. It's like, oh, I got to get this done before everybody goes off for their break. Otherwise, it's going to be late by the time you come back. The other challenge, like Lisa mentioned, is just explaining how systems work to students and like essentially saying, unfortunately, that's the way it works. Like we can't change it. You're just going to have to roll with it. Ideally, hopefully, they would know ahead of time, but I know it's also inevitable. You can't really get everybody to remember every single thing that you're telling them, and that's understandable. The other thing that's kind of related to that is having to tell students about a decision that was made that's not in their favor, and it's because it's due to limited resources. So for instance, if a student needs more funding for whatever reason, maybe there's an emergency situation, but the department unfortunately may not have enough funding resources to give, we have to tell the students the bad news that we can't help you because unfortunately we don't have as much funding or as much resources as we would like. So having to break that bad news when you really just want to help the students is really challenging, but it's also really rewarding if you're able to find a way around it or to find other resources that can help them.
Thank you. And Jessica, what about you? What do you find to be the most challenging or least appealing, and what do you like best about your job?
Yeah, so I was going to say the working with students piece, but I'm going to have a different answer now because I feel like that's just being an SAO. You hopefully like working with students and supporting them and helping them navigate their journey. But I think one of the things I like best about my job is that we are not alone. There is a really good SAO community on this campus, and we can collaborate with each other. I love that I can go to a colleague, whether they're in my office or another office, to ask a question or to connect or just be like, hey, we're working with the same student. Can we chat? Sometimes it's just faster that way than having the student go back and forth between offices. Like, you know what, let me talk to them directly. I love that about this campus because it is a very large campus. There are so many people who do so many things. So the fact that we can do that, love it. One of the challenges, and this is going to sound like an interview answer, but it is my genuine feeling, is when kind of similar to what Jennifer was saying, you have to give the student an answer that they maybe didn't want to hear, or that maybe you don't even agree with, but there are no other options. So maybe they're making a request. So in our office, it would be a petition asking for an exception for something, usually about a policy, and it doesn't always go in the way the student was hoping. And, you know, we can explain the rationale to them. We can help them come up with other options, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and that doesn't mean you necessarily feel good about it. So I think just navigating the, okay, I may not necessarily agree with this decision, but I'm the one giving it to you because I'm meeting with you. So trying to turn that around into, well, how can we make this work in your benefit, or how can we rationalize this so that you're still getting to your ultimate end goal, even if this decision may not seem fair, or it may not seem, or it's just not what you were looking for. Like, okay, well, this is what we have. How do we move forward from here? So trying to turn it around.
Yeah, you know, you guys all mentioned, you know, something that I'm really curious about is working with students. A lot of the time you have to have those difficult conversations, right? Like whether it's about their funding or, you know, maybe they could be on probation and things like that. How do you guys approach that situation? You know, Jessica, you mentioned, you know, trying to rationalize and things like that, but it could still be a really difficult conversation, and you can still have students upset, parents upset. So yeah, so how do you guys, you know, deal with those conversations? How do you approach it? You know, how do you handle it? What do you learn from it? And how do you use that for, like, you know, the next difficult conversation? Jennifer, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so as Jessica mentioned earlier in this meeting, she did mention you just have to be compassionate. And that's just how I approach it. Like, if a student didn't do what they were supposed to do, or there's just something that happened where they now need an exception request, but then the answer is no, like, you just have to be compassionate to that situation, and every situation is going to be different. Just try to understand like what's happening with them, just being a listening ear too, because sometimes maybe they just need to rant to somebody, and just don't take it personal as well. I mean, in the early years, I did take a lot of things personally, and that just wore me down. And that's not really the way you should be approaching. I mean, there's still things that do affect me personally, but I do have to understand too, like, they're human beings as well. They're going through a lot of things too that maybe we might be going through as well. Maybe we might be having a bad day, but that's not a reason to like not show compassion to somebody who needs it at that moment. So just listening to them, keeping an open ear, and just really trying to connect them with other resources on campus that may help them. Like, I don't want to be in a situation where it's just a dead end if they come to me. Like, if I don't know the answer, I'll take the time and sit with them and try to look it up through like UCLA resources or something, or can I connect you with somebody else? There may be times where it has to be a dead end because there just isn't any resource there, or maybe the university just can't provide that level of support that they need, or the type of support that they need. It's just not something that we just do. So I just talk to them about it. Maybe sometimes loop in their advisor with graduate students, particularly their faculty advisor, so that they know their faculty advisor also knows what they're going through, because their faculty advisor might have other resources, or they might connect them to something or someone that may further help them in their situation. So yeah, just looking back to just being compassionate and just understanding that every situation is going to be different and everybody's different.
And Lisa, what about you? How do you approach those difficult conversations with students?
Let's see. I definitely agree with Jennifer and Jessica. Some things I can add is that sometimes I've learned over the years that like less is more. Yes, I want to help. Yes, I want to, you know, say some things, but you know, it's kind of like raising kids. Like sometimes you just gotta close your mouth and nod and smile, and you know, yeah, like Jennifer said, like they just want to vent sometimes, and you just need to let them. So I've learned that part of listening, which was harder for me to do as a younger professional, but now that I'm a bit more older with kids, I am a lot better at that. Also, for me, policy is really important. So, I usually make it clear what the policy is,
Mhm.
and it's a hard conversation, but students need to know, and so and then, when I have the difficult conversation, I think in person or now like Zoom, it has to be really in person or Zoom because you could read their facial expressions and all that stuff, body language. I found that through email is really difficult and it can get really, tricky really fast. Also CAPS. Recently I've had to walk many students to CAPS. I've never had to do that before. And so, it's you kind of have to gauge if it's appropriate because some students might, I had one student get offended,
Mhm.
but really like all I'm trying to do is like, we SAOs are not trained clinicians. We are not therapists. We are not qualified, but look, we can walk you to CAPS and someone has to see you today. Like someone qualified can talk to you, help you, get you more resources. And so I usually try to get that through because as SAOs, we don't know if a student is connected to CAPS at all or whatnot. Well, at least in the departments, we're not. And so I try to kind of squeeze that in there if the student seems like they would benefit from it and everyone really would benefit from going CAPS. Yeah.
Thank you. And Jessica, I'll turn it over to you. How do you approach those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to open the space for the student to say what they need to say and feel what they need to feel. More often than not, it's not going to be targeted at you. It may feel like it, and this kind of similar to something Jennifer said earlier, that took me a while to really accept early in my career. Like I took a lot in, I took it personally. I'm better at it now. I can still grow. But, I can count on one hand, maybe the number of times in 14 years that the student was specifically mad at me or
Mhm.
directed it at me. Most of the time, the feelings, whatever they are, it's directed at the situation. So giving them that space and validating it. Validation is super important. Like you are allowed to say what you need to say, feel what you need to feel, as long as you're not aiming it at me directly. I will give you that space. You can have that moment. And then when you're ready, we'll talk about what comes next. Because my job is to try to support you through this. My job is to help you figure out what comes next. I'm not going to tell you you can't have your feelings. You're allowed to. I fully support this. I would be having feelings too. But I don't want you to live here. I don't want you to be stuck here. So I think it's really also important to talk about what comes next. And if there are resources, if there are folks that, the student should be connected with, we can have that conversation. I typically try to bring it up as an option and not push it unless I feel like I have to.
Mhm.
I've walked plenty of students to CAPS. I've, made referrals to case management all the time. I love case management. I love any office that can support students in the ways that I can't because I'm not trained in that way. So yeah, big thing is just give them the space, validate it because they're allowed to feel what they feel.
Thank you. And, on the flip side of having a conversation is you also have to ensure student successes, right? So what do you think is a critical student success strategy? And how do you implement that with the student? I will start with you, Jessica.
What was the question again?
What do you see as a critical student strategy and how do you implement that with your student?
I think, at least the way I'm interpreting this question in, a big thing is, okay, what I said earlier, what comes next? So reminding the student that they are resilient, they can persevere, they can get through whatever they're going through. And that's not, just for students who are maybe going through a difficult time, that's for students who are thriving too. Okay, there's also a form of resiliency even when you're thriving. So how do you turn this into continuing to do well? Or how do you keep moving forward. That's something I always go back to. How do you keep moving forward and get to where you want to go? And even if it's a situation where maybe their goals have changed or their options have changed, great. Let's figure it out. What comes next? What is your next step forward? So I don't know if that exactly answered the question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Next, I'll turn it over to Jennifer. Jennifer, what do you think is a critical student success strategy that you use to implement with students in advocating for them?
In advocating for, oh.
Or both. I mean, yeah.
Okay. So I do agree with a lot of what Jessica was saying too. And to add to that, I think I may have touched upon this too, but just helping them navigate the degree requirements as well as university resources, because there, as Lisa also mentioned, there are a lot. UCLA is huge. There may be even some resources that I don't know about that students can take advantage of that I need to keep my ear on the ground to. So just making it easier for them to receive that information rather than just dumping it all on them at orientation, like making sure you're sending reminders about things, or if you're talking to them one-on-one, mentioning that to them again, because you can't really expect them to know all of it or memorize everything. As SAOs, we probably have a better handle on that, but that's because we work with it day in and day out. It's just part of our job. But as students and even faculty, they don't really. And so that's where you need to help them. So creating things like maybe a specific student department website where that lists all those resources. Or like recently what I created was just like an online kind of checklist of, if you want to do this action, you click on it and then it spits out what you need to do next. So it helps them with planning, as what Jessica also mentioned, like helping them navigate what's in the future. I think that doing that will help kind of demystify the whole thing and the whole program to students. And especially with graduate education too, like we also can't assume that just because they're an undergrad or they have a bachelor's degree or maybe even a master's degree that they know how to navigate a graduate program or even just UCLA as a whole. So we just got to make sure that they're new to the system. We need to make sure that they have the tools in the beginning, but also to remind them of those tools throughout their time as a student.
And Lisa, what about you? What do you think is a critical student success strategy?
I definitely agree with what Jen you just said. I think it's critical to be open to change, open to listen. We do have 2 student groups in psychology, and so we are constantly meeting. Any committees that meet, we invite the students there, so we're totally transparent. So all in all, like really that communication between students and me and students and faculty, like we're all one, like, cordial group that are communicating. Hopefully that is the goal. And so, yeah, open to change, to listen to the students. I think that's important. Create opportunities to listen to their voice. I think that's something that's different in my current job now than in the past. Like, so we do have a student body within my department that represents the voice of the students that we listen to and we work with.
Thank you. And my next question, and it's probably our last question, is about career trajectories. One, it's a 2-part question. One is, what advice do you have for someone who wants to go into the field, and especially for someone who is just starting in their career in SAO or higher ed? And then 2, the second part is, after being an SAO for so many years, what's the career trajectory? Like, what's next? Like, what's, is it assistantship or things like that? And I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
So I guess the advice for somebody who wants to enter the field, right?
Yeah.
I would recommend reaching out to somebody who's already working there. So if anybody wants to contact me, feel free. I guess I'll enter my email address in the chat once I get the chance. I would recommend, just meeting with somebody in that position, or maybe a similar position that you want, and just chatting with them about, like, what does the job actually look like? What do you actually, like the questions that you're asking here, what skills do you need, or what skills do you use on a daily basis that I should maybe hone? And also, like the question about what's the day-to-day like, that's also very important, so that like, will you actually like doing this job, or is it going to be, or did you think it was going to be something else? The other thing I would recommend for both who are looking into the SAO work or even just developing as an SAO is being involved in a lot of extracurricular things with your job. So like, for instance, for me, I've been part of the Association of Graduate Counselors and Advisors for many years. I co-chaired, I think, 3 years of it. Through that participation, I was invited to join several campus communities. So like campus communities through graduate division, I was invited to join, even ones through like the graduate and professional student working group for different types of initiatives that they wanted to do. And that introduced me to a lot of different people that I otherwise would not have the opportunity to work with just as a department SAO. And I think that also helped me create better connections with them too. So if I did need to ask them a question or maybe try to figure out a solution for a student, I can reach out to them and say, hey, you know, can you help me out here? And we already have that kind of working relationship. So I already knew who to contact. Also too, I also look beyond UCLA. So in addition to like the campus committees that I am a part of, I'm a part of both NACADA and NASPA as members. And within NACADA, I am also the co-facilitator of NACADA's advising on graduate students community. And it's a collaborative group that I'm co-leader on, and it's the group is for doctoral students, not for doctoral students, but for professionals who work with doctoral students and trying, basically you're sharing best practices with other folks from other universities, which I think is very important in roles like ours too, because we can get just so siloed into UCLA and the way that UCLA works that maybe we might not think about how other universities might be doing something better with maybe the same resources. So just expanding your reach out there, and that's not to say like you should agree to like tasks that will add on to your work that you don't really see any value in, or like, oh, you know, we need you to do this. Like, don't say yes right away. Like, really think about like, will this actually help me in the future? Will this actually help me develop a skill that I need or that I want? Because then, yeah, you might end up accidentally burning yourself out if you just keep saying yes to everything. So like, yeah, if you're invited to like a campus community, just also be mindful of your own time as well and your own well-being. Essentially practice what you preach to the students. If you're telling them to take care of yourself, don't forget to take care of yourself as well.
Thank you. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you. What
please.
advice do you have for someone who wants to grow in the field? And, you know, if you know of any career trajectory after an SAO3 supervisor?
Yeah, so I would say get involved with groups such as AGCA, UCAN, ACE. You don't need to be a SAO to get involved. That's how I met Jennifer, to be honest. By getting involved with AGCA, and consider participating in things like PDP, SEP on campus. These are programs through UCLA that's free, and it'll totally help you, your career trajectory. And some things that I learned through PDP is that networking is such a scary word, but really all it really is you're building relationships. I can email Jessica and say, hey Jessica, you want to go for a cup of coffee? And there we go. It's not networking, it is networking, but it can just be like I'm building a relationship. Yes. And I've been approached before where in my previous position where somebody wanted to job shadow me or have an informational interview. So I'm more than happy to do that, and so I'm sure other SAOs are too. So for those of you who are interested in going into student affairs, yeah, it's okay, just email someone and say, hey, I'm really interested in becoming an SAO. I'd love to job shadow you for an hour or two, or have an informational interview with you. And I don't think you'll get a single no. So definitely I encourage you to try that. And for career trajectory, after being an SAO, I've heard different things. I've heard people say that, there's really not, it's such a specific skill. And so like there's not many things to do after. I kind of disagree. I have many SAO friends who are now CAOs, MSOs, directors, And so, really it's how you apply your skills and how you sell yourself in these interviews. And, like my goal was to, at one time, to become a fund manager, I told Grace.
Yeah.
And that's why I did PDP. Maybe I want to switch into fund management because I enjoy all the financial stuff so much. And, maybe that's in the works later on. Not really, Lori. I know my supervisor's here. But, like it's really possible. Like, if I wanted to, I could ask for an informational interview now with my CFO and like see what her day-to-day is like. And maybe I'll realize I don't want to do that. That's why I'm doing what I do now, what I love. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Thank you, Lisa. And Jessica, same question.
Yeah, it's going to be an echoing, but my response for both someone kind of newer into this field or who is interested, but also maybe trying to look to expand after being an SAO for a while, is that networking piece, that reaching out. I believe strongly in informational interviews. I believe very strongly in learning about what folks do. Even at the very beginning of, this meeting, you heard what the three of us do, what our experiences have been. I was in a department and I didn't need budgeting experience. I didn't do scheduling. Like it's very specific to different offices. So I think learning the wide array of responsibilities or expectations that exist under the umbrella of SAO is really important. And the best way to learn about that is to meet with folks. Also, anyone is welcome to email me too. I may not always have availability, but I'm happy to meet when I can. Coffee is always great. Love those. And for like kind of moving up a career trajectory, I think it still relates to learning about what you want. It may not necessarily be a title thing. It may not necessarily be a step up thing. It could be an experience thing. So that is something I would encourage folks to keep in mind, especially if they're feeling stuck. Like, well, maybe there's something that would be considered a lateral, but it's actually going to give you more fulfillment. It's going to give you different experiences and different challenges, and that's what's going to feed you. So the base of all of it is put yourself out there, talk to folks, get information. Also, for anyone who is not connected with ACE, the Advising Communities of Excellence, it's open for everyone. Please, please, please look into it. It's a wonderful organization. So I am on the committee for that, so I'm biased, but honestly, it's great. So if you have questions, you're welcome to reach out about that too.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. We are at time, so I appreciate you all for being here today, especially to our panelists. And I will be sending out a recording of this as well as their emails, if that's okay with them. And thank you all. Have a good afternoon and happy holidays.